Thanks so much for joining us today, John. Can you tell us what your title was when you were in the military and what you're doing here today?
Sure. So I was Captain John Frankman, and I was a Special Forces Green Beret.
Yeah, so tell us, you left the military recently, is that correct?
That's correct. I left in July.
Why was that?
So I left the military because I chose not to get the COVID-19 vaccine. So I didn't get the vaccine because I'm a Catholic, and at first I was aware that there were aborted fetal cells used in the testing and the production. So I was a detachment commander, got to 7th Special Forces Group in June of 2020, took a team in September of 2020, and we all saw that this COVID shot is being rolled out. And we were all on the team. So I was a detachment commander in charge of 12 individuals. And we were all kind of skeptical because we knew, okay, this is being rushed. We know it's emergency use authorization, but I personally realized that there were aborted fetal cells being used. And just going back to kind of what I knew morally is that, okay, as a Catholic, there's remote material cooperation. I probably shouldn't have any part of it. As I continued to learn more about the shot itself, as I learned to learn more about the morality of vaccines as well, I realized that it wasn't just that a baby was killed back in the 70s. It's that it's the continued theft of that baby's body parts, and that the abortion industry is just horrendous. Like, we're talking about human embryo kidney 273. That implies that there were maybe 200 attempts at trying to basically take a kidney. I mean, the baby has to be so developed in order to do that. So that's absolutely horrendous. And I just thought that a disease that has over a 99.99% chance of survival doesn't merit me being a participant in the murder or the theft of an unborn baby.
Did you have concerns about how it would affect your health?
Absolutely. Yes. Everything factored in. I think the better question would be, why should you take the shot? But from a health standpoint, a lot of us within the team, we were already hearing that it could cause heart issues, myocarditis, pericarditis, problems with young men. We were aware that natural immunity worked better than any kind of shot. So we were worried about the health conditions, and also just worried about kind of the precedent it's set with regards to government tyranny and trying to get people to conform or move in a certain way.
Now, I've heard critics of people like yourself try and say, well, they're in the military, they should know they should have to take that no matter what. What's your response to that?
Right. My response is that we are required to enforce lawful orders, but we're supposed to push back against illegal orders, and that we take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And this order was illegal. People need to understand that in order for the Secretary of Defense to order us to take a shot, a vaccine, it has to be FDA approved. The shots, there is not an FDA approved shot available. They are all under emergency use authorization. And that's important because EUA shots, the drug companies, they have no repercussion. They're not responsible for any damage done whatsoever. It requires that there can't be any other anything else that can work as far as solutions, any other kind of so for instance hydroxychloroquine or other things like that. So just the EUA is problematic. So it's illegal in that sense. Also, just with our First Amendment rights, you're able to push back. So yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the kind of pushback you got from inside the military when you started saying that you didn't want to get vaccinated.
Sure. So it started with different policies that kind of affected my career. And one is just perception. So at first, I was the only officer within my company who was choosing not to get the shot. Then later on, I'm noticing that they're starting to say they're going to take our deployments and things like that. So as a detachment commander with 12 individuals, I told my guys that I wouldn't punish or reward them based on whether they received the shot before it was mandatory. And we had a mission taken from us. So I had it
before it was mandatory.
Before it was mandatory.
Wow.
So to a country that didn't require the shot, that we'd been planning on going to for a number of months, that they laid air assets out for us. So I was on a military free fall team. So that's basically military skydiving, but with equipment. So it's not fun.
Scary.
Yeah, no. So we had a mission taken from us because First Special Forces Command made it a requirement to deploy that you had to be vaccinated. And the problem with what we call kind of shadow policies, or commanders using whatever influence they could, legal or otherwise, in order to get people to take the shot. Then after the mandate came out, I put in my religious exemption, and I wasn't allowed to deploy. I wasn't allowed to travel. I wasn't allowed to PCS or move on to further assignments. So for those who didn't get it, there was a continued pressure. There was also a testing requirement to get tested twice a week.
Wait, so you put in your religious exemption. Did you feel like you were punished for putting in a religious exemption?
Yes, absolutely. The policies that were in place from higher up was meant to punish those service members that didn't conform. The religious exemptions were not done speedily. So the Army, they took their time, and my exemption was never answered. I put it in October of 2021, and it wasn't until December of 2022 when the mandate was rescinded that anything happened. I never got an exemption back, and every exemption that was put in was pretty much denied.
Did you get grilled at all about your religious exemption? Because I know we've reported here for the Daily Signal about how guidance given to military chaplains on basically how to explain to someone that their religious exemption doesn't count. Did you encounter anything like that?
I encountered it somewhat, so not in the formal submission of the religious exemption. Really love my chaplain, and also I appreciate my leaders trying to do what they could for me at that lower level. Certainly, I had to talk to a doctor in order to put it in, and he was explaining how he's a Christian and how it's okay to use the aborted fetal cells. And well, I have a different theological view on that. Yeah. And then talking to in 06 in my exit interview, so kind of grilled about some of the religious questions as well, and kind of made to seem as though I'm a little bit extremist, or I don't really have a place in the military because of the views that I hold.
Do you think you're extremist for the views that you hold?
Absolutely not. I think I am a metaphysical realist. I think I am a person who looks at reality and tries to live and conform my life in accordance with reality. And if a shot is going to negatively affect my health and has nothing good that comes from it, if it's using the murder of an unborn child, the theft of its body parts, and if it's used in order to kind of push government tyranny and is having negative effects on people, I think that's just common sense.
So overall, we know that there's a lot of people like you who have said, no, I'm not going to get vaccinated, and have suffered the consequences of it. How do you think that's affecting our military?
It has absolutely destroyed readiness, and it's destroyed readiness on a number of different ways. We've had 8,500 service members that were kicked out of the military. That was either for outright refusing, or the religious exemptions were denied, and then they were kicked out. We also have a high attrition and low retention. So people like myself, so I made it through the mandate, but I'm still choosing to leave, and that's because I've lost out on enough career opportunities. So we're having those who are kicked out, we're having low retention, we're having low recruitment, and a lot of that is due to the vaccine mandates. People are seeing how their buddies were treated, they're talking to their friends, and their friends are just not necessarily convincing them to go in. And we also have all of these medical injuries. And I have had a number of service members come up to me because they know where I stand on the issue and tell me about heart issues they've had, partial facial paralysis, different things. We're seeing people having heart attacks at dive school, having heart issues when they're flying in a plane. Yet, and Senator Ron Johnson was looking into this, that there is DMed data, so that's Department of Military database for like medical information, and that's just being obscured, and we're not getting clear answers on it. So, and then there's the moral injury, making people do something that they don't want to do and something that's illegal. So readiness has been absolutely destroyed from the shot mandate. And
do you think a lot of the service members believe these health issues have to do with taking the vaccine?
Yes. The ones who have come up to me and told me about that, yes.
So is there any kind of atmosphere of fear that has to do with the vaccine and the effects that's currently in our military?
Some people are definitely concerned about what could some long-term effects be. And I think there's a fear of what will happen if they try to mandate this again. So yes, there's definitely.
Now, I know you mentioned that you missed out on some different career opportunities because of this. I think I was reading in your story when you announced that you were leaving the military that you were supposed to teach at West Point. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I applied to teach through the philosophy department at West Point, and it's a broadening assignment. It's something that's kind of competitive. I was waitlisted, finally got accepted. And I was accepted to teach philosophy and then to teach at the Simon Center for Military Ethics, so ironically an ethics course. And I applied to a bunch of schools, was accepted the ones I wanted to go to, and I was ready to go. However, my religious exemption had not yet been answered by spring of 22, and I would have had to have moved by summer of 2022 in order to pursue that. But because the religious exemption was pending, and because there was a policy that did not allow those with pending religious exemptions to move, I wasn't able to go. And that would have made me a career military guy, because that would have been 2 years of grad school, which is a 6-year additional duty service obligation. So you add 8 years to my already 8-9 active years of service, you might as well make the whole 20. So this policy, and I'm a Special Forces Green Beret, And that means that I've had 2 years of training to get to where I was. So not only was it the 2 years of Special Forces Qualification Course training, which included language school, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, but I couldn't try out for that until I've had already a few years of service as an infantry officer. So basically, the military is losing out on a lot of money and a lot of funding that they've put into me, a lot of just very specialized training. And I just would have loved to have had that teaching opportunity, a chance to really form young cadets, to try to teach them to care more about the Constitution, about their service members, than about these career policies that are just being pushed.
So do you think that this is effectively weeding out a lot of principled men like you and leaving the military with potentially less principled men in it?
I think it absolutely has had that effect. Yes.
That's really sad. And I would love if you could share with us some examples of comments that your leaders made to you when you were going through this process that made you realize how kind of woke the military has become.
So I'll give some positive ones, not just to be negative. And I do appreciate one of my battalion commanders recognizing that, hey, yeah, I can't put you on, I have to take you off the team. I'm not going to try to screw your career over for it because you're doing amazing, you know, but this policy, it's obviously it's kind of problematic. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it shouldn't necessarily hurt your career. From that to when I was doing an exit interview, I asked the full bird colonel, do you think that this order was legal? Do you realize it requires an FDA approved shot to be legal? Are you doing anything to look into vaccine injuries? Well, I was then asked, do I believe in selfless service? Do I think that my actions reflected selfless service? Do you realize that too much ideology is a bad thing? Have you heard of the Crusades?
Wow.
That seemed a little bit off topic to me, but trying to answer that or saying that I was going to a dark place because of this. And I just had to say, well, I'm at peace. I did what I thought my conscience wanted me to do, and I'm just trying to do God's will.
So what's next for you now that you've left the military? You're starting to speak out about this. Do you have any future plans?
So right now I am trying to speak out about this. I want to raise awareness that the military shot mandate was illegal, that it was immoral, and that it was medically unsafe, and it was hurting readiness. I'm trying to do that in order to push for congressional hearings, House Armed Service Committee, COVID Select Committee, weaponization of the federal government, in order to expose all of those facts above and to push for amendments for the National Defense Authorization Act in order to bring service members back in who were kicked out, in order to reinstate their pay, to help them to recover all of those opportunities that they lost out on, and to try to make something like this unimaginable in the future. And furthermore, trying to raise awareness as well that there were maybe over 20 lawsuits against the DoD, against Lloyd Austin for the military shot mandate that are getting thrown out as moot. And that is a huge mistake because that would have set legal precedent for the next time that these commanders try to do this. So right now, just trying to raise that awareness, still praying to God about what his will is for me. Maybe it's coming up here and trying to do some work because, you know, the unfortunate thing about being in the military when your leaders are just trash, more or less here in DC, is that you have bad policy. Like, what are you trying to enforce? So trying to get into the fight in some way, shape, or form.
Now, last question for you. I know you mentioned Senator Johnson. Who are some lawmakers that stand out for you as being advocates for people in your situation?
Thomas Massie was amazing. And I reached out to a lot of service members when I was going through this whole ordeal. And his office was very responsive. He was trying to raise awareness on it when a lot of other folks weren't. Matt Gaetz is my congressman. His office had been very helpful as well. He helped get the op-ed published, which has gotten me some of this media attention. So I appreciate his continued work in fighting for conservative principles.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're so grateful that you would share your story with us.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.